Okay, we're going to go ahead and get started. So first off, I would like to thank our sponsor, Central Washington Grain Grower, for putting on this portion of the conference, and I trust that all you guys have enjoyed the conference thus far. My name is Dale Whaley, and I work for Washington State University Extension. And the first speaker today is Doug Poole. And Doug is a third-generation farmer, farming 20 minutes from Lake Chelan in a 7 to 9 inch rainfall zone on sandy loam soil. As he recently returned to farming and started direct seeding with adding canola in his rotation to manage his investment, improve his yields, maximize moisture, and build soil health. So take it away, Doug.
All right, thanks, Dale. Dale's actually our big help around our area. He's our extension agent, and he's the one that keeps our bugs out of our field, so he's been a great help. Obviously, we're going to talk a little bit about managing Chem Fallow for oilseeds today. You'll find that I cross over between wheat, canola, whatever else we're trying to grow, but I'll try to keep the talk more around what we've kind of discovered around Chem Fallow. I apologize to anybody in the room that's been no-tilling for 20 years. It might get a little boring. I kind of geared everything around kind of the Chem Fallow talk to anybody that's kind of new or is struggling with whether you want to go with canola, whether you want to go with direct seed, or you want to go with both, like some of us that have lost our brains and tried to do everything at once. So I wanted to talk a little bit first, again, back to that whole idea, well, am I gonna do any of these at all? And so direct seed, Chem Fallow, canola, well, it's always gonna work somewhere else, we know that. And it's because, well, they have better soil, they get more rain, they get rain at the right times, they don't have clay, they have sand, they don't have sand, they have clay. This is actually my favorite, and I've actually heard this in a conversation. They don't have sand or they don't have clay, so I don't know what they have there. They've tried it here. That was 30 years ago. You know what? We did 40 acres. It did not even come close to working, so there's no way it's going to work today. They were only successful, and they were only successful in that area because, well, they were cougs. So I put that in for my Husky friends. So why would we do direct seed and crop rotation? We're obviously trying to break some disease cycles. Trying to break the use of chemicals. And even in a conventional tillage system, we've gotten used to using one Roundup or one mode of action. And again, we're trying to get to a situation where we can get those broke up. And direct seed, again, if you're not a direct seeder or you're new to it, the options that direct seeding and then obviously with canola rotation in that becomes endless of what you can do to break those cycles. We get to begin to break down a plow pan. We in our area, in our sandy loam soils, not only do we farm in about 50 feet of rock, we have a plow pan at 6 inches. And we've been farming, in my estimation, we've been farming in our area in 6 inches for about 40 years. And so you can imagine if we could begin to break that either with direct seed or canola, we can begin to access some soils that we never knew we had or even existed. Direct seeding, we can improve that fertility and the placement. You just heard, I just sat in a deal about pelletizing compost. And again, even in that situation, they talked about, well, we're better if we can band that product down with the seed as opposed to broadcasting it. And that goes back to switching from anhydrous to direct seed in that ability to have a tool that will actually put that fertilizer where we want it, whether it be below the seed, next to the seed, so on and so forth. Canola, and you'll hear this, I suspect you're going to hear this continuously through the conference. We've seen it, there's data to show it, but again, I think we are all farmers. When we visually can see it and process it in our mind, you can drive by a field, I believe in our area, you can drive by a field and know that it's got a better wheat stand following canola. We kind of, not to put him on the spot, but Wade Troutman from the Bridgeport area, which is just north of where I farm, consider him the godfather of canola in our area. And that is the stuff that he has seen. He doesn't need to have the research plots, which are nice to have, by the way, Frank. Not to belittle you or anything. But Wade continuously from here on out continues to see those yield bumps following his canola. And so quite simply, why not? Why wouldn't he infuse that into his crop rotation system? You probably know that, and you heard me earlier in the main session, and you're going to continue to hear it throughout this, is we farm moisture. In the end, I am farming moisture. I actually talk about and I didn't come up with this, I've heard it from other people, I think it was from the Bickleton area. I need something sticking in the air to catch the fog. We saw this last year. We had no snow last year, absolutely. We were completely open. Didn't see any snow until the 4th of February last year. The only moisture I had was the fog that was hanging on that stalk, whether it be the stubble of wheat or the canola, or unfortunately probably some of the goat grass that made it through and was sticking up too. If I'm farming moisture, obviously the biggest concern I have is I've got to find something that will improve my water infiltration and increase that holding capacity. My no-till system or implementing crop rotation and getting the organic matter up will help with that. And obviously the number one reason, soil health. Again, I think you've probably see if you get all your data or your newsletters and everything from NRCS, you can kind of see that that's becoming the new buzzword. But I think it's so much more than that, and you'll hopefully kind of see throughout the presentation how much I kind of feel like soil health is the reason that I'm trying to get this as a system in place. I have to be honest, when I first came back to the farm, I was trying not to buy 6 cultivators and 6 tractors and 6 rod weeders and everything else. I really wanted to implement a one-pass system just so I could, I guess, reduce time and reduce inputs. And really that whole mentality and mindset in my system and in my operation is probably 25th in line of the priorities I have. It's a beautiful byproduct, but in the end, everything that I can do as a system is going to improve soil health. So as we mentioned, we farm in 7 to 9 inch. I know Frank mentioned earlier in the main session it was 10 to 12. I'm not sure where he does his research, but it's not on my farm. Last year we had 4 to 5 inches. I had a couple of fields that, for whatever reason, of course they always have to be next to the landlord's house. I had 3 inches on a couple of those fields, and so we struggled in maintaining our moisture and trying to I guess just have enough to seed. And I have heard all the horror stories across the region. We all dealt with that. Mainly sandy soil. I am in my 3rd year of direct seed. I've got some of my fields already will be on their 2nd rotation of no-till, and I already can see the difference. They continually told me you can't see any difference in no-till for 10 years. Don't believe them. I am already seeing the feel of the soil. I can tell in water holding. We've already froze up. We've got deep frost in the ground. In my fields that will be 2nd time no-till, I don't have near the puddles in those fields as I do right across next to me in fields that will just be no-tilled for the first time. And in my summer fallow rotation right now, I've got winter wheat, winter canola, spring wheat. I'm going to be trying to add spring barley, spring triticale, winter peas, sunflowers, and then we are working on our farm with cover crops. And it all goes back to that whole soil health. I'm trying to get rotation into that system and try to build up my organic matter, break the cycles, and do everything that we continually hear. And we're already starting to see that, even with what little bit of cover crops that we've played with. I use a John Deere 1870 Conservapac hoe drill. And if you can see in the background, that's Pateros, Washington in the background. And so the fire, where all the big fires are, if you can imagine that entire hillside in the back on fire. And we actually sat up in this field and watched the fires come into the town of Pateros. And when they say it burnt the town up, they weren't kidding. So I've got a 3/4 inch fertilizer knife with a 3.5 inch paired row. Each one of those, the fertilizer shank and the seed boot, are on their own accumulator, so they work independently. I'll show you a couple pictures here pretty soon. There's a reason I kind of gotta have that. I'm trying to band my fertilizer about 1.5 inches below my seed, so I don't have any. I reduce my fertilizer burn. The other main piece, and I almost think this is just as much as important, and it'll tie into what we're going to talk a little bit about today, is I've got a self-propelled sprayer. I happen to have a John Deere 4930 with a 120-foot boom. My sprayer is set up, and again, this is where I think these conferences are interesting. You're going to hear everybody have their own way of doing it. I think the one takeaway, if you take anything out of this, is if you find something that works, don't become somebody that's just got to tinker all the time, in my opinion. I found something that works, and I'm going to stick with it. I use the air induction nozzles. I kind of actually like to look back and see a little mist and see big drops at the same time. I feel like I get decent coverage that way. I use 5 gallons to the acre. You'll hear a lot of guys that are going a lot lower. So here I am going to double speak right off the top of my head. I'm considering going with just a little less water, maybe go down to 4 gallons to the acre. And I'm running about 8 to 11 miles an hour, and I think speed's an important thing to consider, and you'll kind of understand with this next picture why I got to go slow with a 120-foot boom. So that's what we farm in. And so it's nothing to go down the field and have one end of the boom 20 feet in the air and the other one's on the ground. And so then when you turn the corner, let's just know that I will be a salesman for John Deere 4930 breakaway booms. They do break away, and they do come back quite nicely. I will say, and we'll talk about it a little bit in a minute, that all kidding aside, there's a lot to those booms breaking away, being up in the air and everything else. In my particular program, I try to spray in the fall if I can. If we happen to catch a rain, I try to put on about 10 to 12 ounces of Roundup at that time. And then in my spring and summer fall, and again, remember, I'm a summer-fallow rotation, so I take a crop off in August. I don't plan on seeding again until the next August. What I have found that's worked, and don't ask me why, but this is what I use. I use 20 ounces of Roundup. I use 16 ounces of Unison. I like the way that they don't antagonize each other. That's supposedly what the research shows. And then I don't use ammonium sulfate. And if you're familiar with Chem Fallow, there's one side of the fence is you got to have ammonium sulfate, and there's the side that I happen to sit on that says, well, I don't want to mess with that powder. I don't want everything plugged up. I don't want to have to worry about the hired man trying to get it all mixed up, and so I use a Hellfire product. So I've got some keys that I guess I've kind of picked out just in my short time that I've been doing Chem Fallow. If you're converting from conventional tillage, when would you have tilled the ground? If you're trying to figure out when you're going to spray, well, you would have driven by, you would have saw some weeds in the field, you would have went and hooked onto the cultivator or the weeder, and you would have pulled in. Well, why can't I employ that same methodology with Chem Fallow and when I'm going to spray? Weeds are small. I just had an opportunity to come back from the National No-Till Conference, and of course, resistance. All they can talk about is Roundup resistance. I mean, I think we heard in the main session today, they've got some weeds that are now resistant to everything. They don't know what they're doing. They're actually back out hand pulling some of these weeds. And you'll hear a lot of those guys are beginning to admit that it had to do with the fact that they didn't get that weed when it was small. They kind of waited. They tried to wait a week, maybe went on vacation for Memorial Weekend, and they came back and that weed had gotten out of control, and they tried to get it, and it got some of it, but it didn't get it all. All they did was, and I don't understand the breeding of it and everything else, but they feel like all they did was they bred a seed that got a little Roundup in it, and it became Roundup ready. Obviously, we know, but again, I like bringing these points up because it's fun to come to the conferences. Spray when that plant is actively growing, and I actually put this in open for uptake of the chemical. I know of a Chem Fallow or a no-tiller, he sprays at night. He pulls in at 11 o'clock at night and quits spraying at 10 o'clock in the morning, and he swears by it. That's the way he does it. He obviously has to worry about inversions and so on and so forth, but he believes he gets the best kill. He's able to get away with a little less chemical because he sprays at night. That plant is not shut down because of the heat. He actually feels like it's open. It might not be actively growing, but he feels like it's open. Obviously, weather. Is it going to be windy? Is there going to be an inversion? Is it too hot? Obviously, with Roundup, it is so hard when you're behind and you've been blown out for 10 days straight, and it finally turns off nice. I will shut the sprayer off when it gets to 78 degrees, because by the time I get everything done and that load sprayed out, it'll be 82, 83 degrees, and I have seen where I felt like I didn't get a good spray on those last 10 passes, and so I will shut it off. It's the hardest thing to do, to shut that thing off and not finish that field. Should I spray the whole field? And we'll talk a little bit about scouting in a second. Do I spray that whole field, or do I just try to piecemeal it in? My experience personally has been every time I tried to piecemeal it in, I ended up with a wreck. I ended up spraying that field 2 more times than if I'd have just pulled in and sprayed the silly thing when I had the chance and when I was there. It was much more efficient to have done it. That's, again, a learning moment that I've had. I think you got to be prepared to act fast. It'll go back to scouting in a second, and that's why I've spent a lot of money to go out and get a fairly large sprayer because if I need to go, if I need to get over that and get it sprayed, I need to move, and I need to move in a hurry. And again, that, from an experience, I've been where I thought, man, if I just would have had that half a morning, I would have gotten a better kill. Scouting. Scout the whole field. The days, I believe, and again, this comes back to all my 30 years of being a conventional farmer and then coming back and trying to switch to no-till. You got to scout the whole field. You can't drive by. I have the good fortune of my wife being in the room today. It's nothing for 2 nights or two nights a week to get our favorite adult beverage, and we just go drive. We'll get in a four-wheeler, and we will cross-section fields. I will tell you that don't cross-section the field in the same place, and I'll show you a couple pictures of why just that is a no-no. Some more keys to Chem Fallow. Speed. Well, you can see I farm around rocks. I've got unshaped fields. I don't have anything that's straight. And so if I'm taking a 120-foot boom and flinging that thing around, even if I'm doing 8 miles an hour, I can guarantee you the boom's doing 20. I get half the spray job, and it shows up every time. Circling obstructions. Lifting over obstructions. Maybe you don't have this, I don't know. We do. And so it's nothing to go down through a field. I've got several fields. You don't make a pass unless you're either going over something or going around something. And my worst spray jobs are where we lift over. We really are trying to implement a system where we circle everything and try to get a decent job there. But every time I lift over something, I get a worse job. It's just what's starting to show up. Hopefully you don't farm anywhere where you got to lift over anything. I will tell you, I had a neighbor that he didn't lift over his pickup, and I guess the breakaway worked, but the window didn't take the breakaway very well. Speed and dust mitigation. Again, if you're trying to keep that field clean, every inch of that field has got to be thought of as just as important as the other. And your wheel tracks, those are huge. And so if you've got a bigger tire, you found that a bigger tire gives you that added traction, and then you got to maybe be thinking about different nozzles behind that wheel track. A situation where I've got to get more chemical on there to get it covered up. But that will, I've seen millions of Chem Fallow fields, including my own, where I had wheel tracks I had to go back. I don't want to be on my high horse, and I don't know how many chemical dealers are on there. And maybe I shouldn't say this because they'll all be knocking at my door, but I will buy the better product every time. I just have struggled time and time again with generics. Maybe I'm doing something wrong, but I have never ever had good luck with a knockoff Roundup product, a knockoff 2,4-D. It just hasn't worked for me. Maybe someday I will be able to manage that and figure it out and figure the chemistries out better, but I just have not figured that out yet.
Your question.
I'm sorry.
You just nozzle it, you size it up behind the wheel track, or you just want to get the nozzle?
I would go with a different nozzle. I haven't had, I haven't had trouble with air induction. That's why I kind of went to the air induction. It seemed to fix my wheel track problem. I can't tell you why. I just kind of stumbled across that. But again, the John Deere 4930's got a fairly small tire. In my Chem Fallow, I feel like, short of being in my canola Chem Fallow stubble, I just didn't have any dust problems. Plus, if I'm not getting over 10, 11 miles an hour, I just don't seem to get the dust issue and have that wheel trouble.
What's your number one, like your target weed? What do you fight the most?
Russian thistle. Oh, what's our number one weed is Russian thistle, and then a lot of grass. We're fighting jointed goat grass, cheatgrass, rye, and so that's why I've got the tank mix that I do.
So you're tank mixing 2,4-D
And Roundup.
Roundup?
Yes.
About what rate is when you spray the first time?
I spray 20 and 16 the first time, so 20 Roundup and 16 of Unison, and I use that all the way through. I am going to switch to barrage this year. Obviously, we all had a tight year. I think I've talked to enough chemical guys, they feel like I can substitute barrage. I have to be very honest. I used Unison because I do a lot of what my uncle does. He's been no-tilling in our area 2-3 more years, been doing canola a little bit more. He was using Unison, and come to find out he was using Unison because it's a little safer around orchards. He farms around a lot of orchards, and I don't. And so the more I got to talking, it seems like I'm going to be able to get away with barrage.
I'm not familiar with those names. Is that amine compared to LV6 or what?
The barrage is an LV.
Okay. And the other was an amine?
It is an acid, yeah. So. Again, I've got friends. I've tried this. I've tried some different stuff. I I don't think it's a good time in Chem Fallow to be a mad scientist. Maybe on a couple acres, but I don't feel like it's a good idea on my whole farm. I have made that mistake. I've tried, probably more so with the knockoffs, and I just had no luck. So my main point to this whole thing is once you find something that works, that's kind of really hopefully what your takeaway is from what you're listening to. Obviously, you use labeled rates. The more I read, and the more, again, after the experience last week, they weren't using labeled rates, and they're just now starting to admit that. They were trying to get by with less, and I think they got themselves in trouble, and we're going to see that same thing too. I will tell you that Frank's going to say, what are you going to do if you can't use a certain chemical? If we're not using it right, we have a management issue. We don't have a weed resistance issue. We have a management issue, and we'll cause a weed resistant issue if we don't do it right. Water quality, you go back to my discussion or my mentioning of Hellfire, ammonium sulfate. Those that swear by ammonium sulfate to treat that water, and again, if you read anything on Roundup and glyphosate, it recommends AMS. I've found that Hellfire is much easier to handle, and I'm getting a good kill, so I stick with that. But I think it's a concern, or it's an item that I think a lot of people I don't know really think about it. It's just throw the Roundup in, get going, and spray a Chem Fallow. You really got to know what the pH, that hardness of that water is. And obviously, in all of that, you've got to be mindful, if you're going to be a mad scientist, which I don't like to because I've already burnt myself, is as if we're obviously at an oilseed crop, am I going to spray something that's going to screw up when I seed my canola that fall? That has to be one of your main things. And you'd be surprised, how many people don't have that consideration when they're out trying to get something killed in the middle of July, the weeds all hardened off. They're out there trying to find anything, and they forget that, oh my Lord, now I've got to seed a brassica into that. Obviously, clean nozzles. We do nozzle checks, and nozzle checks. The hired men get tired of it. I actually am going to invest in the remote nozzle check, so you can go through your booms from the back of the sprayer. I think it'll be invaluable, and I'll get a lot less bitching from my hired men that they're going up and down the thing and back and forth and looking. But it's imperative that we go through those nozzle checks. Obviously, clean screens, filters on the sprayer. You've got to have those sprayers pure. And I know I may sound like I'm preaching to the choir, but again, I hear a lot of people say, God, I just don't understand what happened. And you drive by their sprayer and they got 3 nozzles that aren't even running. So I don't know. And I've caught myself doing it. Everything I brought up today is something I've done wrong. I think it's important that I point that out, because we all are guilty of that on a Friday afternoon. The family wants to go to the lake, and I've got to get going, and I just hit a nozzle with a rock. I just got 50 acres left. I'll end up doing that 50 acres again just because I wanted to go to the lake. I think future tools, as we talk about direct seeding and our Chem Fallow and all our rotation and everything else, if we think about this as a system, and it's on the PowerPoint, it's everything that you're seeing, we've got to begin to think about farming as a system, and maybe you all have, and that's great. But I think if you begin to think of it as a system, this whole Chem Fallow and weed control is just a spoke in that wheel. It's just a spoke in that system. But I think we're going to begin to utilize our crop rotations and all of that just from the standpoint of being able to minimize that weed. Obviously, row spacing, that's why I like my drill. I've got a paired row in there. So my 12 inches actually becomes 9. I've got a closer spacing. I've actually seen where I'm reducing weeds in my crop. And then obviously residue management. If you can see that picture very well, on the right was some wheat stubble. All that was about 60 bushel stubble. It had biosolids, so I had 60 bushel stubble and 40 bushel wheat because we didn't get the rain. But on that particular field, I only sprayed twice that year. So there was no way for anything to grow because I had a nice residue mat. And as far as I was concerned, I saved a lot of money. It was kind of one of those fields where I kept thinking, God, I'm going to have to be prepared to jump in there. And ended up pulling in there and seeding it and never had any trouble. So that, I think residue management, as I think back into my weed program, in my Chem Fallow program, if I implement that system and can get it into place and get to a system where I've got residue, this whole chemical thing, worrying about nozzles and all that's going to take care of itself. So obviously, why Scout? I thought it would be important to show you some of my screw-ups. My chemical dealer from Ag Enterprise is in the room. So I called him up, sent him this picture, and I said, "My Lord Scott, what in God's green earth do I got going here?" This was a field that we had driven across several times in the four-wheeler, but kind of got used to just crisscrossing it in the same place and didn't pay attention. Well, sure enough, there was 50 acres that laid just right. And I always scouted at the same time at night. Another aha. Scout in the morning, scout in the afternoon, scout at night, scout at different times where the sun's on it differently. For whatever reason, I happened to go across this particular part of the field moving another piece of equipment. And lo and behold, we determined diffused knapweed. Well, the stem on it looks just about like a red, it's as hard as a piece of wood. It took me 2 applications of paraquat to get that burnt down. That 50 acres looks like crap. It's a very, very, very poor stand of wheat. And it got sucked dry. In a year where this was the field on top of everything else, right next to the landlord's house, where I got 3 inches of rain in that field this last year. There's some wheat there, and thank God it's kind of over the hill. He doesn't see as much of it as I do, but that was my screw up. There's a lot of this stuff. Don't try it next to your landlord's house right off the bat, but I'm not that sharp. Here's some fields that I custom seeded. Again, amazing farmer. They do a heck of a job, but they got into a situation where they were still conventional tillage on a lot of stuff, got behind on that. We caught a 1/4 of an inch, thank God, rain, and so they were in their conventional tilled fields and didn't get here to spray this. And it doesn't show up very well, but you can actually see the carcasses there. If I could have gotten an aerial view, it is just a perfect circle. And they're about the size, they're probably twice the size of the tractor and the drill sitting there together, and there's nothing there. Absolutely nothing. It had drained that field just like that. And I wouldn't, in my estimation, I didn't feel like they were that late whatsoever. The reasons for my canola rotation, and again, I think of it as a system, so I'm not just talking my Chem Fallow, but once I get the canola planted, my oilseed direct seeded, I want to be able to do something with the grassy weeds, and I don't think I've done a very good job of mentioning. I'm solid goat grass. Rye used to be the thing that we had, we could see it. That was wonderful. We could actually go out and pull it, or if we wicked it, we could see it die, or if you could see something dying. If you've ever had goat grass, hopefully you never have. I believe it's worse than cheatgrass because it actually falls over underneath the canopy of the crop, and you can't tell where it is until you're out there harvesting it. Well, I'm solid goat grass. It's just the way we had a couple bad years, it just exploded. And so I've got to have something to control my grassy weeds once I get the crop planted. And so I obviously use Power Max and Sure 2 or Beyond. And it doesn't show it very good, but this is actually a field that I had this last year. There was a field shown earlier. Mine actually looked more like it, where it was just the goat grasses matted between the canola. I came in with 12 ounces of Power Max this fall and got a wonderful kill. I'll probably come with another 10 or 12 in next spring, and I really believe I'll have that field fairly well cleaned up. I did want to just show you another reason why I direct seed. I don't know how well it'll show up, but that's a storm that we had. I'm actually sitting in the field. I just got done seeding. This is a field that I was in that was still one of my conventionally tilled fields. That particular storm came across and hit me. I had to stop. It was shaking the tractor so bad, and then there was a 1/4 of an inch of rain that came. Followed that. In that particular field, the water was running by me in the tractor. If I got out, I was standing in that much water. After that storm was gone and done, I could kick the soil, and about 2 inches down, I was dry dirt. So that amount of rain that came that fast just washed off. I didn't get any of it. There was no water infiltration. Obviously, it wasn't going to hold anything because it didn't infiltrate. But I just wanted to give you an idea and show you the picture. That's why I went to direct seeding. Soil health. Any questions for me before we turn it over to Frank? All right, thanks.
Table. Our next speaker is Frank Young. Frank Young received his master's and PhD degree in agronomy/weed science from the University of Minnesota. After graduation, Dr. Young went to work for the USDA ARS and has been at Pullman for 31 years. His research focus has been weed biology and ecology, Russian thistle and jointed goat grass specifically, and conservation tillage, cropping systems, and cropping systems. Since 2003, he has conducted research to introduce winter canola into the wheat fallow low rainfall zone of the Pacific Northwest.
Thank you, Doug. You did a very nice job. I got a feeling we're going to be playing good cop, bad cop. You've all sat and watched all the dramas on TV. Doug was the good cop, telling you how to do it and what you should do and everything. And I'm going to kind of talk about what's available for herbicides. I haven't done all the work. If we want to really find out what we can use, what we can't use, what our plant back restrictions are, probably come back in about 12 or 15 years and we'll have some of those answers, because they're not on the label and they're not in any research that has been conducted. What I want to do today is I guess I'll just breeze over weed resistance, because we've hit it pretty hard already. The only thing I want to say about that is, okay, Doug, I got to say it. What are you guys going to do when you lose Roundup due to resistance? That scared the crap out of me this morning when Neil said that in Western Australia they have glyphosate, glufosinate, and paraquat resistance in their major grass species. We're not that far from it, people. We really aren't. And there's only one way to take care of it, and that's management. Switching site of action herbicides. And I forget who mentioned it this morning, but we may have to bring out some of the tillage implements again. I'm not talking about the moldboard plow. Let's just take, for instance, rat-tail fescue. Rat-tail fescue does not like steel. And I'm talking about just a harrow. But we were at a meeting 2 years ago, and the farmers would rather spray and spray and spray because they were no-till, rather than take the harrow out and take care of it when it was small. It's one of those things, you do what you have to do, and if that means you have to do that, then fine. It's a weed that we're going to be facing more and more of. Second topic is I'm going to briefly talk about herbicides for chemical fallow, and then we're going to look at, again, real quick, herbicides in canola. That's what we're concentrating on. Rather than really feed you information, all of this is kind of a prelude to hopefully we can generate some discussion and what are other people doing in their chem fallow. We've heard what Doug does. A lot of people I know use the Unison Roundup mix. That's fine. We've got some people that we've actually they're putting paraquat in one of their systems or one of their timings in chem fallow rather than Roundup. There's way too many people that are using 60, 70, 80, and over 100 ounces of Roundup in their chem fallow. I'm going to be very blunt. That's ridiculous. We cannot continue to do that. Okay. Just a few tidbits of information. This is taken off of the most recent International Survey of Herbicide-Resistant Weeds. In the world, there are 430 cases of weed species by site of action resistant weeds. There's 238 species of weeds worldwide that is resistant to some type of herbicide. There's resistance in 22 of 25 different site of action herbicides. And there are 155 different herbicides in that category. There is resistant weeds in 84 crops in 66 countries. That's what we're facing right now. Actually, going to a national and regional weed science meeting, it is getting very boring. I think weed science in itself is very boring because all they're talking about is, I found another weed that is resistant to this herbicide. Neil brought out about Palmer amaranth. Big deal. But what in the heck are they doing about it? That's the next step that needs to be done. We need to figure this stuff out. We have it, or it's going to come, and we have to be ahead of the curve. Here's just a small list of the major local resistant weeds that we have in the 4-state Pacific Northwest, including Montana. Kochia Russian thistle, prickly lettuce or China lettuce, common lamb's quarter, redwood pigweed, mayweed chamomile, Italian ryegrass, wild oat, downy brome, and annual bluegrass. Wild oat is resistant to just about every grass herbicide there is. And I hope we don't come to that with downy brome, giant goat grass, feral rye, Italian ryegrass. Italian ryegrass is a really, really bad problem right now in Western Australia. And they're spending a ton of money on that. I can't wait until we go to the Western Society of Weed Science in March in Portland. I looked at the agenda, and probably 2/3 of the talks are, I've got resistant kochia now. I've got colleagues that have spent the entire winter telling farmers how to control resistant kochia to Roundup and other herbicides. The newest one is prickly lettuce. Dr. Ian Burke found that that's resistant to MCPA and 2,4-D. I could never find that. Roundup killed it in the first place, so I'm not sure what anything more to say on that. Here's a list of the majority of the herbicides or combination of herbicides that are listed in the Pacific Northwest. This comes out of the Pacific Northwest Weed Management book. You can read them. I'm not going to read them all. A lot of Sharpen. I'm going to say Spartan would love, if we had a winter safflower that produced for us, we could grow all the safflower we wanted, and we could take care of our broadleaf weeds for 10 months in Chem Fallow with Spartan, because safflower is labeled for use with Spartan.
No, it's not. Not in Idaho.
Pardon?
It's not in Idaho. It might be up here.
It is. It generally is. It is in Canada, and generally, if we have it listed in Canada, it can come down here pretty easy. But nobody has pushed it yet.
We've tried down in my area to get the FMC reps to push it, and they say there's no money in it. Trust me,
Oh, that could be. Okay, thank you very much. The other thing is, remember last year, we were being pushed to look at curb in summer fallow. I can remember 25 years ago, we worked hand in hand with Monsanto. Remember their aid to tillage? We would spray Roundup in the fallow, and then we'd come back with maybe a disking or one like tillage, and that would be our method of controlling the weeds in fallow. We do it in the fall, and we always compared it to curb in the fallow, which worked very good for grass weeds. Dow will not look at it for the same reason. Curb is labeled in specialty vegetable crops, some of them, and that's where their money is. Even if they had it labeled, it would be priced out of range for a chemical fallow. So Dow is not pursuing that. So we can probably cross that one off. Anyway, I think I've listed 19 of them. Would somebody care to guess how many of those do not have a plant-back restriction to oilseeds? Okay, here's the answer. They're highlighted in yellow. We've got 3 of them: Vita, Gramoxone, or Paraquat, and Roundup. They're all burned down herbicides, and that's it. That's our choice. The numbers behind it are months that you have to wait for planting canola after you've put that down. Now that's their labeled rate, i.e. 24 ounces of 2,4-D. That's the labeled rate of Banville or dicamba. As I've mentioned before, if we sat down and figured out, I know a lot of guys, okay, I'm going to put 6 ounces of 2,4-D on, and I'm going to do it just before I plant. Okay, go ahead and do it. You're not going to be covered if you got an insurance claim you want to do. The label's the label, and that's what's going to be done. Can you imagine how long it would take to conduct a study with all the environmental problems we had? Okay, we get a rain here, we don't get a rain there. Let's just take, for example, I want to do a planting date of Banville. So you put it down 1 month, 2 months, 3 months, 1 week, 2 weeks before I want to plant. And then you've got 5 or 6 or 7 different rates that you want to look at, and things like that. So it is really tough to say I can get by legally with 6 ounces of 2,4-D 1 week before I plant. That's what we're facing right now. And it doesn't really matter what herbicide you're talking to. But we really have to be careful. One grower put down Ally in May, put down a full complement, planted a non-GMO or a non-tolerant canola, and by 3 days after emergence, he had 100% kill. Nothing survived it. He forgot. It was his mistake, and nothing he can do about it. It's on the label. Okay, let's move to, we got plant bat restrictions on herbicides of concern that we use in wheat. Maverick, Olympus, Powerflex, Beyond, and Pursuit. We can get by Beyond and Pursuit if we go ahead and plant an SU tolerant or resistant canola, so we can do that. Maverick, Sumner is a variety that we could come back and plant as we did at the Ralston project a year ago. But again, we're looking at 22 months, 26 months, 40 months with Pursuit if we do not use one of these tolerant or resistant varieties that are available to us. So that's why we have to be very careful what we're using in wheat as well as Chem Fallow. Yes.
Did you just say that you could use SU tolerant canola behind and beyond? Is that what you mean, the Clearfield?
Yeah, it would be Clearfield. I'm sorry. Yeah. Mm-hmm. The Maverick was an SU. If you put Maverick down, you'd have to have an SU tolerant, that CERT tolerance that Roundup Ready puts in, or what Sumner had. There's a variety, Claremore, out of K-State, that is IMI resistant or IMI tolerant, that you could come back with plant Claremore after you had used Beyond. Or you have to use the Clearfield variety. To try and answer some of these, Drew Lyon, Ian Burke, and I want to put out through several locations, one up in the north central region, one at Davenport, trying to get to some of these answers of what can we do in a Chem Fallow situation to come back with canola. And what we've come up with is using Roundup, RT3, and then add individually Amber, Banville, Buctril, AIM, Bassagran, Sharp, and Curb, and Stinger. And then our non-Roundup treatment is Goal plus Buctril. And we're going to look at some reduced rates compared to what's on the label and see what we can do. And what we want to do is see if we can, Dale is going to help us find an area or two up in Okanagan, Douglas County, and then we'll do it at the Wilkie Farm. But we want to put this out 30 days before we plant, We feel that that's one of the real critical ones because we might have gotten some rains and have some broadleaves, and that's what we're kind of after right there is some of the broadleaf weeds, and we want to see what we can do and pick up with some of these. I've listed amber. That's one of those that when we talk about, it's an SU, and kind of similar to Glean and Express and Harmony and Finesse and Ally. What I see a lot of farmers doing is they've got a weed resistant problem, and they'll combine. You know, we always talk about let's combine 2 or 3 herbicides, or 1 or 2 herbicides with your main one, and amber is cheap, and they'll go with the full rate of amber and reduce the rate of the added herbicide that they're trying to get the resistant weed with, and that's not the way to approach it. You want to have a full complement of the herbicides that you're adding to get your bad weeds. You don't want to skimp on that. So this is one thing we're going to try and do this fall or this late summer to see if we can get some of these answers for some of you guys that in your Chem Fallow. Here's some of the herbicides that we can use in canola to control some of our weeds. Pre-plant incorporated, we can use Sonolan, Treflan, post-emergence grass, Assure 2, Post, Select. Here's one of our problems. If we don't go with a Roundup Ready or a GMO that controls broadleaf weeds in canola, we do not have a decent broadleaf herbicide in canola. The only thing we have is Stinger, and you will never guess the weed that it misses. Yes, Ed? Russian thistle. We have to, and this is particularly problematic in a spring canola. Where we have the Russian thistle, we have lamb's quarter, we have kochia. So we need to keep that in mind, that if your number one weed is Russian thistle and you're going to do a non-GMO canola, boy, better be a clean field. And then we have the herbicide resistance systems, Liberty Link, Roundup Ready, and then of course Clearfield is a non-GMO. I'm waiting for a winter canola that has Liberty Link trait in it to be commercialized to again take a little bit of pressure off of Roundup Ready winter canola. Okay, boy, Doug hit this one right on the head, and I think this could lead to some discussion. What are you going to do if your Chem Fallow fails? Are you going to till it? Are you going to do spring canola? Are you going to do spring wheat? Or are you going to double fallow? Anything is possible. I do want to mention one thing. We've done a lot of work post-harvest controlling Russian thistle. And if we want to talk about reducing cost, reducing pesticide, we did a lot of work with the weed seeker. We're always talking about new technology where we, and it's all with nitrogen, where precision agriculture, and I'm going to put 3 pounds on this one and in this square meter, and I'm going to go 20 pounds at the very next square meter, on and on. We did a lot of work with the weed seeker on Russian thistle. And Roundup did not do as well as paraquat, but with the weed seeker, we were, because what it does is it senses the weed and sprays only the weed and not all of your ground. It senses the green chlorophyll in the plant. And we reduced paraquat, the amount of paraquat that we used, almost 60% in the field. So it's expensive, but I mean, the implement is expensive, But who knows, maybe if we really get down to it, a conservation district would buy one and lease it out. I don't know. It's just a possibility. So with that, I would like to generate some, if there's any questions, fine, but I'd like to find out what some other people are doing with their Chem Fallow, what problems they're experiencing, and maybe we can address a few of those too. Thank you. You know, the problem with Russian thistle is it's migratory. And everybody does, I said weed science is boring. Here's a typical example. You'll get a manuscript that says I followed weed seed decline of Russian thistle or this weed, and these management systems took care of it, and it went from whatever to nothing. It doesn't work that way with Russian thistle, because I guarantee you can have 100% control, clean field, and your neighbor lets it go, for example, or it broke out of CRP ground or ditches. That's the problem with Russian thistle. I really don't, you know, these post-harvest studies. If I kill Russian thistle now, I've reduced seed production 900%. So what? Did your neighbor do it? That's one of the problems. Russian thistle seed is very short-lived. It's generally 2 years, maybe 3. And I'm going to go out on a limb here and say, when I first got here in 1981, I wrote with DuPont the label for glean. I fully believe that we would still have glean if certain farmers would not have been greedy. Okay, and what I mean by that, we put together a protocol that if you sprayed glean post-harvest, you had 100% control of glean through the next summer fallow, and 85% control then through the next spring. One application of glean, you had 100% and 85% control for 2 years. One farmer in southern Idaho found out that, my God, glean helps control downy brome. So what did he do? He put the full rate on in the fall for downy brome, and then put the full rate on in the spring for his broadleaf weeds. Within a year and a half, he had full resistant to Russian thistle, kochia, and everything else that he was growing along with his crops. And everybody else followed him because I got something I can take care of downy brome with. I firmly believe that if we would have followed things diligently, glean would have lasted considerably longer than it did. And what I've been trying to find, and what I liked about Spartan, is you can tank mix it with Roundup in February, get your grasses and weeds that are up then, and you've got pretty darn good control of broadleaf weeds, all Chem Fallow. Well, there again, we go back to everything else. Is it 1 week, 2 weeks, or 2 months for 2,4-D in Banville? What I'm alluding to is it's probably okay. I would have to check, but it's probably okay if you put down an early spring application of Spartan, and then came back with winter safflower, or maybe even spring safflower. I would have to read the label on and see if there's a plant back restriction.
That's what determines it is the plant back restriction for you to be in label for that.
Because each herbicide has a label that says, okay, here's a plant back restriction for canola, here's one for mustard, and then if they do not include safflower, it falls into the category of other crops. And most generally, that's 30 days or 60 days. So it might be something to check. But I apologize, I did not mean that we were looking for a label or have a label to spray over the top in crop.
What is the Spartan plant? Put it on in April, you plant when we plant?
We were putting on, we were putting Spartan on in February, even in March, if the weather was good. But most of the time in March, we were catching the winter annual grass weeds And then that's when we had the soil active Spartan that we would put down when we looked at it.
It's very pH sensitive.
Yeah, yeah. And that's the same thing with all of these herbicides. You know, there's 50 different label things on the sulfonylureas and glean or 2,4-D and dicamba. You know, it's pH this, how much rain do you get, on and on. So that's our problem. And I apologize. I don't have answers for a lot of things. It would really take time to find these, and we hope that maybe next fall we can start finding some of the answers, at least for 30 days before 30 days before we wanna plant. So, thank you.